I was up in Oregon, Washington County, Oregon area, working as a paramedic in 1996 to 98. And I lived across the street from a guy that was, I believe he was a X-ray tech. And he was working the night shift as well. And he'd get off at 7 a.m. in the morning, as did I. So as I was coming home, it was very common for him to be driving his SUV into the driveway across the street. And he'd get out in his scrubs. And here I was in my paramedic uniform. You know, I'd greet him and say hello. And sometimes he would greet me with, "So what's new in the annals of human stupidity?" So we had exchanged war stories. And one of the stories he told me about was he had a guy come into the emergency room complaining of abdominal pain. The nurse usually comes in and asks, "So what's going on?" She writes it down and transfers that over to the doc, and then the doc eventually comes in and sees you. Well, apparently he didn't want to share any more details than necessary, that he wanted to speak to the doctor, to the male doc. The x-ray got notified to come in and get an x-ray for this guy, and this neighbor of mine was the tech, so he brought him back. But when he did the x-ray and got the initial x-rays up on the screen, he realized what he was dealing with. And he told me this guy had a psychiatric background, was successful at putting an electrical cord. Let's see if I got one. He took an electrical cord, prong end first, and inserted this thing into his penis.
Are you allowed to say that during live stream?
Am I allowed to say that? Why? It's a word. It's a medical terminology. In his urethra? What in the world? How in the world would I even, how would you do that? Start off with one prong first? What'd he do? Even if he pinched them together and made it narrow, how'd he get this section in? He had an electrical cord. Plug in first. I don't know if he cut it off so it was short. I would imagine he would have to in order to get into the ER without a green 6-foot cord and dangling between his legs. Inside of his urethra. What? Which leads me to the next story. I don't know what they did with him. Surgery, whatever. Let me plug this back in before I lose my battery. The next one was along those same lines of insertion. I was in EMT school in Southern California. Mesa College, San Diego. For any of you out there, San Diego natives know what I'm talking about. Right off Genesee Avenue. Correction. Okay. The class, the EMT course was given at Miramar College up in Miramar. There were also classes given at Mesa, but I stand corrected. This was at Miramar College in a bungalow where we had our anatomy physiology. And the instructor was a nurse. Let's see what subject we were studying, anatomy, I guess. And she brought in some visual aids for the class that night. It was a night class. And she had some x-rays. So we were learning about the differences between the female and male anatomies, skeletal structures, in particular the pelvis. And she would hold up an x-ray of a pelvis, and we'd try to identify, based on the knowledge we were just given, whether it was a male or female. Don't quote me on these numbers, but a female's pelvis is going to be 45, and a male's is 33, something like that. Or in other words, a male's is narrower than a woman's. And then she holds up another. Now that we got that down pretty squared away, she holds up another X-ray of this pelvis. And she says, you notice anything abnormal about this x-ray? Everyone's raising their hand or yelling out ideas, and she's like, no, no, no. It's like, what in the world? Well, I can notice something in the pelvis is kind of the shape of like it's got beveled sides to it, about like this, and it obviously looks man-made. It's got a flat bottom and then kind of an angular edges as it widens to the top, and then a top to it. And you're like, what? And it's right seated, like right at the bottom of the pelvis, that angle. Well, nobody got it, but you're probably all trying to guess what in the world. Well, it turned out to be a small-sized Skippy jar.
Trans? You're not gonna be.
Skippy peanut butter jar?
Nobody, none of the trans.
I don't know. Was it glass or plastic? It doesn't matter. But it's in the pelvis, so you can read between the pelvis as far as what route of entry, the only route of entry that thing could have entered. And it was a male pelvis, by the way. Sorry. Well, apparently, as the story goes, this guy came into the emergency room. It was one of the nurse's patients when she was working in the ER. And the story was that when asked, how did it get there? He claimed he fell on it. He did what? He fell on a Skippy jar. And it inserted into his anus. Rectum. Rectum hell killed him. No. Badoom. Psh. Anyhow, yeah, he claimed he fell on it. And it just strategically went up inside of him and lodged itself up in his rectum. So there you have it. And I would imagine they had to surgically remove that one. And so you tell me, an electrical cord inside the urethra and plug in first, and a Skippy jar in the rectum. Yeah, for the lay people out there that have no idea that these types of things really do happen. And more than likely they're happening in your neighbor's house next door. It's somebody's neighbor, right? Those people were somebody's neighbor. So anyways, yeah, the annals of human medicine, we'll say.
You need to learn how to make it, children.
We'll leave out the word stupidity.
You need to learn how to make it.
But you insert your own word. Thanks for listening, guys.